Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to start by greeting our Archbishop, P.G. Nzuza, the leadership of the Church of the Holy Ghost, the congregation, the youth, and of course, everyone that is visiting our YouTube page on this day. My name is Ntuthuko Kwala, and I'm going to be your host this evening as we tackle a very monumental topic. We're going to be talking about addiction. It is a very heavy topic that is impacting not only our church, our society, but also the broader world. And today I'm not alone because I have our distinguished guests, our experts that are going to be helping me dive into this topic. To my right, I have Mr. Abner Mariri, who's going to be sharing his story of addiction. And I also have Onthine Dedricks from the Breakthrough Wellness Center. And I have Pastor Dani Fantonda from Urban Life. Greetings and welcome.
Good evening.
Thank you,
Nice
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for joining us. I think we're going to dive straight into it. And Mr. Mariri, I want you to take us through your life journey.
Wow. Let me take this opportunity to express a word of gratitude and recognize and appreciate His grace, Archbishop, and to the leadership of the church, and to my platform associates, and to you, and to the young people that we are impacting today. And thank you so much for having me. I don't know where to begin. They always say never, because pride does go before the fall. And if you ever wanted to see a miracle, you're looking at one. Because truth be told, I shouldn't be alive had it been not for the grace of God that navigated me through the muddy waters of addiction. Cut long story short, born and bred in the East End in Guatemala, left this country just like many other young people who are desperate to make something out of their lives. Brought up by a mother who worked as a domestic worker and a father who worked for a company called Van Leer, lived in a 4-room house, literally. And I always had a dream to better my life, to become something better, because I believed that life was meant to be more than what it was. Left this country, ended up in the US, spent 12 years in the US. I was the first one to graduate in my family from an institution of higher learning at the time, which was UCLA, in economics and political science. So when I came back, obviously, fast forward, when I came back, worked in the entertainment industry, Label M, Cry Freedom, Dry White Season, Power of One, the late Huma Sikela, Stevie Wonder, Quincy Jones, all that, and all with the hope, the promise of tomorrow, to get back home, to utilize what I've gained abroad for the purpose of taking my family out of misery. And God opened doors, and as He opened doors, unfortunately, I befriended wrong people, wrong crowd, and I started with something I shouldn't have started. Note, I lived in the US for 13 years, never touched a cigarette, never touched beer, never touched nothing. Came back to South Africa, as God was opening doors, started to read my own writing, thinking that I've arrived, I've made it, with a little change in my pocket. And I started with alcohol, graduated to even stronger things like whiskey, and had an agent who marketed my services as a public speaker. And I'll never forget, it was a Tuesday night. I was in Sentin, and I'd been invited to come and chill. And I went to chill. And unbeknown to me, got tipsy a little bit. And before I left, I asked for a restroom. It was on a Tuesday night. And they said, go upstairs. When you get upstairs, you will find a door on the left. And instead of going to the door on the left, I went to the door on the right. And I found approximately about 9 people in that room, mostly young, and the 2 people that I knew absolutely very well. And they pushed the door. They started to argue amongst themselves. Because I was tipsy, I had absolutely no reference of scripture or anything to bail me out. And they eventually said there was a table in the middle, a small little table. And they said to me, Chief, you got to try something before you walk out because you found us. So there was powder, there was all kinds of stuff. I saw something that looked like a cigarette, and it was a crack pipe. So I said, there's a cigarette, I can try that. And in that room, if I were to be graphic, there were approximately about 3 young ladies who were half naked. So I took that crack pipe, put it in my mouth, and I tried it, and I coughed, and they laughed at me. And I said, well, I'm going to try it again. minutes later, it did absolutely nothing to me. So I decided I'm done. I'm going home, got in my car, got on the M1 freeway. When I got on the freeway, the drugs started to kick in. It's like a new world was opened up for me. And I saw stars, man. It was like my brain was raining stars. And I decided instead of going home, I made a U-turn and went back to that house. And instead of getting home at around 10 o'clock at night, I got home at 4 o'clock. And that was the start of a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And of course, I hid it, you know. The first 2 years of my life, I could control it. But after 2 years, it went pear-shaped. You know, I started with crack cocaine. From crack cocaine, I wanted something that will accentuate the high. So I made crack cocaine with cocaine, then crack cocaine, alcohol, then ultimately ecstasy. And at the height of my addiction, I practically, for all intents and purposes, lost it all. I became decadent, I became arrogant, I became conceited, self-centered, I was full of grandiosity and pride. It was all about me. I caused strife in my family. I remember my father figure, married individual. I don't think, and I can say it proudly because it's all in my book, I can, you know, I don't think there's a strip joint in Joburg and maybe Cape Town that I've not been to, you know, because that was the places where I could use, you know, nicely with other people in a clandestine fashion that we're using. So I started to lose practically everything. You know, at the height of it all, man, I had a house, and I say it with the absolute humility. I had a house in Four Ways that I bought land, built it, I sold it, and used the money for drugs. I had a house in Sandton, did the same thing. And yeah, before long, I was hitting rock bottom. I caused strife in my family. And I'm grateful to two friends. It was the late Huma Sikela and my friend Lebo M, who came to my house 5 o'clock in the morning and said, Chief, you gotta go to rehab. And they paid for me to go to a place called Crescent Clinic. And I relapsed while I was inside. It's a Keso now. And I came out, went to another place called Yelim Clinic. And I relapsed 2 days after I came out. And eventually in 2010, I decided I'm going to check myself into a place called South Coast Recovery Center, which was in Ramsgate in Margate. And I spent 9 months. And you must know that I practically hit rock bottom. I became a friend of I hate drugs with a passion. And for every young person who's listening out there, nobody goes into addiction thinking that they'll become an addict. We all think that dope addicts, because I was a crackhead who was in denial. And man, everything disintegrated completely at the seams. That's why I say if you want to see a miracle, you're looking at one.
I want to pause you right there.
Yes.
I want to pause you right there and bring in Onthien into this conversation. Onthien, we also believe that you have your own story to share.
Yes, Tux, thank you. But I also just want to say quickly, thank you to the Archbishop for this opportunity, and to the Church of the Holy Ghost for inviting me and having me. Yes, I was in active addiction for 22 years of my life, started very early. It started, you know, as it starts with everybody, a little bit of this and a little bit of that, trying to be in with the cool kids. And it progressed very quickly throughout my 20s, just clubbing and doing stupid things. And then in my late 30s, unfortunately, I also started, out of curiosity, mixing with the wrong crowd of people. And I went to my first treatment center for the wrong reasons, to get away from an abusive relationship and to get the heat off of me from my family. Got out of there, and I was one of the least likely to relapse because I did my program. On day 65, I relapsed, and it was an ongoing war for a good year after that. Ended up on the streets. And by the grace of God, I ended up in rehab for 6 months. And I just did my thing, and I eventually ended up volunteering there. I found God there, and today I just do my best. You know, if somebody asks me what do you do for a living, I do my best.
That's all we can do.
That's all we can do.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
I like the fact that you have just, thank you for being open and sharing your story. I think that's very important. But you have both touched on one aspect of addiction, which is substance abuse, right? But there are an array of other elements. It's a multifaceted situation that we're facing. We have young people that are suffering from social media. Yeah, there's an element of materialism, and these are all these conversations that I want us to look at, you know. And I'm going to bring in Donnie. He's been waiting there. He's like, when are you bringing me into this conversation? Donnie, what role has spirituality played in recovery in terms of addiction?
So I think, and thank you for having me and the church and the leadership. I think the problem that we have is that we were made for enjoyment. God made us to enjoy. And he made us that when we enjoy ourselves, when we're having fun, a chemical called dopamine is released.
That's right.
in our brain, in our body. And so we chase after that thing. And often the other addictions outside of substance abuse is often just, I want to feel happy, I want to feel happy, I want to feel happy. And the role of the church and spirituality, but especially the church, I think, is to point people to true happiness. And that is a relationship with Jesus. And I think God put the chemical in us so that we can truly enjoy him, so that we can truly experience him. But because of sin, we look for that release of dopamine, of enjoyment, of fun in the wrong place. And so it might be shopping, it might be social media, it might be the wrong crowd, whatever it may be, we're looking for it again. The problem is that we want a better feeling every time. We never want to just repeat the same. Even in our lives, we go, oh no, this is boring, it's the same as yesterday. And so even in that act of addiction to something or chasing after something, we want a greater high, like you guys spoke about. We want a better feeling. And I think the church plays a really key role in helping people understand the purpose of their lives and understanding how true freedom can come. The church is not, we're a recovery center in a different way. We are
a hospital.
We're a place where people, we're not social workers, we're not experts in getting people off different substances and all that. There are people who specialize in those things. But we can play the role of saying, hey, we can fill up the emptiness that you might feel because we know the one who can ultimately complete you and fill you up and give you that sense of, hey, I am somebody, there's meaning to my life. So that's a lot to say. The church plays a really key role, and I think a relationship with God is ultimately the solution. Unfortunately, we have portrayed it as, or over years it's become like the church actually wants to spoil our fun. No, actually the church actually wants to show you what you were made for and give you purpose. And so,
Church is life. Church is life.
Jesus gives us true life. And so there is there's a reality that we look for in the wrong place. And the church community, I believe, is a community of recovery. And so again, I'm sure we will talk about it later, but the things about stigma and shame, and so people feel it's an incredible thing how we feel like these things are tattooed on our forehead. It's like addict. Everybody knows and whatever, and so we want to hide. And I think the church plays a key role in removing that.
And if I can add,
Go for it.
And I'm grateful that the church provided a platform for us to be able to engage on these matters, because for the better part of my addiction, I was in leadership, I was in church, a charismatic Pentecostal church. And because sometimes the church makes it impossible for me to share my pain, I was dying inside. In between services, I was using drugs. And there was nobody who could detect the fact that I had an issue, or somebody who could say, let me reach out to him. And I'm grateful that, you know, today we've got a church that says we're going to address these issues. There is a platform to engage. We know that if it's happening nationally, it certainly is impacting the church. And the church has to be politically and socially relevant to be able to address these issues and create a climate conducive for young people to say, let me raise my hand, I've got a problem, where can I go? And the church is creating that platform. And that's what I just wanted to highlight from
Well, I think religiosity and legalism creates a platform for shame and saying, you're not good enough, look what you've done, you're so bad. Instead of saying, it doesn't matter what you did, you can get a very real relationship with Jesus.
Yes.
And we can point you that direction. And there's a community of people who you can actually have a relationship with, where no matter what you've done or what you are going through, you're part of us. We accept you. We love you. We will support you and do what we can to stand alongside. And for me, the key spiritual thing is that all kinds of things that we can teach people, but be part of a loving community that brings out the best in us, brings out the gold in us. Don't just come to services and leave.
That's right.
But actually building lives together. I think that's crucial for people who come out of recovery. If they just left, they end up going back.
Yes.
That's what happened time over time.
Andine, I want to bring you back.
Thank you.
These two gentlemen are boxing away here, which is brilliant. Let's touch on the misconceptions around addiction. What are those misconceptions? Because there's this thing of, we just know that it's alcohol, it's substance abuse, you know. Take us through that.
That's substance, and I liked what you said, that it wasn't visible. Yes. Not all addictions are visible.
Yeah. No,
Substance abuse, you can see the deterioration physically, mentally, and you can pick that up with gambling and with sex addiction and the stuff that the people really do not want to talk about. You can't see that because there's no physical indication that this guy is on something. And you know, Donnie, you also said something very important. You know, for me, God does not come with small prints and terms and conditions. He says, come as you are.
That's right.
And I think that is the big thing and the message that I want to bring to the youth today and say to them, you know what, you've got this fear and you feel like your parents and your family and your friends and the church is going to ostracize you because of addiction. And that is why it's important that we have platforms like this and that somebody is starting to open up their mouths and say, listen here, we need to talk about this. we need to do this. Addiction is not a choice. I, for one, did not wake up one day when I was a child and say, oh, well, I want to be an addict when I'm grown up.
And you see how this happens.
And I mean, I'm in my 40s now, and my life could not be any better. Another one is that rehabs do not guarantee a success. You know, at the end of the day, your real battle starts at the end of your treatment. When you leave treatment, and that's where the battle starts. That's when you need to start applying what you've learned, the tools that the rehab has given you, and you need to start fighting. Gloves off.
Yeah.
You know, and it's important that people look at these things, and you know, like I said before, not all addictions look the same. Yeah. You have a gym addiction or anything. It's an obsession of the mind with a compulsion of the body.
Yeah,
but that's what it is. And
I think the thing that's so wonderful for me in terms of what you said is the church can provide that space for the person who's in recovery to, when they come out of a center or wherever they've gone, people who can come around them, people they can talk to, people who can hold them accountable, people who can journey with them, a community where they loved and accepted, One of the things I love about what we've seen in our community is we have people who during the week, during the day arrive to be part of the recovery program. And we see them, we know, oh, that guy's here he's here for recovery. The wonderful thing is that the recovery thing is not just for substance abuse, it's for a whole lot of things. Porn addiction, gambling, whatever. We don't know what they're here for.
Over-the-counter medication.
Yeah, anything like that. So we don't know what they're here for. We know they're here for the recovery. So nobody can judge. We don't know what's going on. We don't know what the journey is. We don't know what they're here for. And so there's no shame. There's no shame. People come and go. And those who join the church, because not all of them are from the church, those come into our environments and we are able to support. So
thank you for touching on that. And you have talked about support a lot. That's been the consistent word there. And I want to bring in Abner there. So when you were going through your addiction, how did the family support you?
I'm fortunate, by the way, that I come from a very strong family. Even though addiction divides, there's a crew that will support you. There's a crew that will fight with you. There's a crew, if you come from an African tradition like I do, there's a crew that will say you are bewitched.
Yeah.
Let's go and find a witch
Cast the demon out of you.
Cast the demon. So all kinds of stuff. So it brings such division. But I'm grateful, and I know a lot of people who don't have a support structure that I had. And my family rallied around me and came to understand, because they themselves, even though they were not physically addicted to drugs, they were impacted by the behavior that I exhibited. So they had to come with me to understand the nature and the dynamics of my disease. And to say, if we're going to walk a block with them, how do we assist them? And one of the ways that they assisted me was basically to come to meetings with me. Where I remember I was institutionalized for 8 months in a recovery center, no phone, no contact with the outside world. When I came out, it's a totally different world. So I had to acclimatize through what is called my relapse prevention plan.
Yes.
In terms of how am I going to prevent myself from relapsing. And one of the things that I had to do was to bring my family into my relapse prevention plan, to say they are my #1 accountability team. So they supported me strongly in a sense that they attended meetings with me. Now you're talking about an addiction that's wreaking havoc in the townships. And the kids in the township, they will go to rehab or get institutionalized and come back to the same environment. And it's just a matter of time before they relapse. So for me, reinforcement of family structures, community units, outpatient programs that are galore, that are contextualized to suit the township. So how did I, my family supported me. I had a sponsor who checked on me. I remember one time, just a kind of long story, I went to my son's school, and my son said, "Dad, you need to come." And I just literally was maybe 2 weeks out of rehab. And he said, "Dad, please come." And I went, and when I got there, because my son went to an area where I used to buy drugs, and out of the blue, somebody tapped me on my shoulder, and when I turned around, it was my dealer, Wow. And of course I escaped, but the desire and the craving was so strong that I even remembered his digits after almost a year in recovery. I remembered his digits. I wanted to call him. It was my sponsor who, after a week or so, I called my sponsor and said, "Why didn't you call me the same time? Because now you're romanticizing the idea of going back." So he came back speedily, gave me a test and tested me and said, because remember, it's a behavioral disorder problem. You lapse in behavior before you pick up anything. So he had to put me back onto the track for me. So that support for me was very imperative.
Thank you for sharing that, Abner. I'm going to bring you in again on theme, again on the element of family support. So you've been working closely at the Wellness Center, right? How do you equip families? That's on the flip side now, How do you equip families to go through this journey of recovery?
Okay, Thank you, Tux. So what recovery centres normally do is they invite the families for family meetings where they discuss the challenges of the addict. This is during treatment. And then also after treatment, with your relapse prevention plan. And it's important to let your families know, look, this is the stuff that you need to look out for. This is how I'm going to start acting out. This is how when I get emotional or when I start, I don't sleep or whatever, and they need to educate themselves. Luckily for the families and the friends out there, there are meetings for them as well, where there's a support system as much as there are for us addicts. Right. And with technology, what is amazing is we have online meetings. So there's no longer the excuse of, but I can't get to a meeting, or I don't have time, or I don't have this or that. There's no excuse anymore. There's online meetings. There's a lot of support groups, especially for the families as well. And it's important that the families, you need to educate yourself. You need to know, first of all, what drug is my kid using? What is it mentally that I need to start looking out for? How can I support my child? Because there's a difference between supporting your child and enabling your child.
That's right.
So if you are going to baby the addict, at the end of the day, you're going to kill the addict. And that's the sad reality of, life and addiction. And being a family disease, you should know. For my parents, it was a different journey. They had to get to the point where they completely said, like, listen, we're cutting you off.
Yes.
And the same with the rest of my friends. They had to cut me off. And I had one friend who said, no, wait, hang on. I'm not giving up on you. Yeah. I'm going to send you to rehab, and you're going to do this.
My goodness.
You're going to do this. And honestly, when I walked into the rehab center, I did not want to hear the word God. I felt like God had abandoned me, and that I was, very shameful. The guilt and the shame was just next level. And it's through working the program and through doing what I needed to do and starting to rebuild those broken relationships. But yeah, to get back to your question, it's important that families out there educate themselves. Living in ignorance is letting your addict child or your addict spouse live in fear, and enabling them to do whatever they want. It's addiction is, and you know this.
No,
you hear this. It's cunning, it's baffling, and it's very powerful. And in the addiction circles, we have a saying where one is too many and 1,000 is never enough. And that is the problem. Once I know if I have to pick up a drink that I might have another relapse in me, but I surely do not have another recovery. And my parents and my family as well, I cannot put them through the same thing again.
Yeah.
So I think for me, something that stood out from what Abner and Anthina said is they both had someone who said, we're going to you need to go to recovery. And I think in the whole journey, they needed that person to say, we care enough.
Yes.
We're going to do whatever it takes. And I think in the church, we need the same attitude where we say, I'll be the friend that takes you to Jesus.
That's right.
I'll be I had that in my life. I was on my way on all kinds of stories and things, and we don't want to get into that tonight. That'll just go off the rails. But I had a friend who said, you coming with me? I was like, I don't feel like this. He said, you coming with me? And he said, he took me, and he's in the same kind of a way, and we need that in the church. People who say, that outsider, that one who sits there all on his own, that one who look, because the pandemic of loneliness that we have leads to abuse of some description for many people. And so and so for us to go, no, actually, I'll walk across the room, I'll connect with you because I care.
Yes.
I love that. It actually touches on 2 points. It's the point of empathy and compassion. But we talk about these tools, right? She's just mentioned how do we equip families to take us through this journey. Now I want to focus on the church. How does prayer or meditation help facilitate the process of recovery?
So I think for me, you know, you have the spiritual disciplines, reading your Bible, praying, and so on. And I think it's really helpful to show people how to do it, but not in the way of saying, if you don't do these things, there's a problem. But actually, these are the keys to continued freedom. These are the keys to a fulfilled life. And so prayer is vital, but prayer has also got a bad rap. You know, you've got to pray like this, you've got to pray like that, you've got to change your voice, you've got to do all kinds of things. Actually, prayer is talking to God.
Communication.
And if we can get people to understand, and especially young believers, just talk to God. Just talk to God. He knows what's going on in you anyway.
That's right.
But your prayer shows your dependence on Him. So if you want to be addicted to talking to God.
Love it.
Because you need to just get into that space. And so I think prayer, meditation, and meditation, when people hear meditation, they're like,
Yeah.
you know, now we're going into all kinds of weird things. But actually meditation is just sitting, reading the Word, and going, hey God, talk to me from your Word. Your Word is truth. Your Word is unchanging. Your Word is eternal. What does it mean for me today? And God speaks by His Spirit in our minds. He shows us things. He opens things up. And we're not in a rush. And I think we live in a world we're in a rush. We're running from thing to thing to thing. And so prayer meditation slows us down. It gives us a fresh perspective. You need, you know, find a place. There's an author that says different place, different space, different perspective. And I think sometimes to go to a place where you just can think about things, meditate, read the Word, and you see things different. And the path that would have taken you to potential relapse or potential addiction, whatever that might mean, whether it's swiping that credit card, or whether it's, you know, I scroll forever, you know, I find it just pauses me, and I get a fresh perspective.
I had the biggest problem with the church because I found the church to some extent extremely, and this is subjective, extremely judgmental, condemnatory, and people who think they know you, they tend to put a full stop on your life to say it's finished with him. There is no more restitution, no more revival, no more. God cannot re-engineer their lives. Until I read the Bible for myself, that where men and women put a full stop, God puts a comma and say the story continues because I'm running my own race. You will be surprised. The support I got was the support from outside and not from the church. From the church, I got people who gossiped about my condition. Because when you take drugs, you don't eat, you lose weight, you become emaciated, and people said, he's got Z3. Instead of helping me. But I thank the grandmothers at church. Even though I lost weight, they knew how to access the throne room of grace on my behalf for God to get me back up. So sometimes I do have a problem, Pastor Daniel, with the church in a sense that it has become incredible. That's why a lot of people are afraid to share their pain.
For sure.
Because they will feel like they're going to be judged or talked about, so they rather die inside.
Yeah, and I think that's why we've got to work really hard at having healthy church communities where we, and even where those who are in ministry like myself are not seen as better than others. Because when I tell people I get tempted, they're like, really? No, I do. I'm a normal human being. And the devil comes for all of us. And so I have battles. We all have battles. We have struggles. And we need to come alongside one another. And when I read the Psalms, I watch David fight his battles. And I see David win his battles. Never mind David and Goliath. But that was a one big battle that he won.
Yes.
But I believe when you look at his life that you see through the Psalms, he won that battle in prayer and meditation. Because you see, there's prayer, there's meditation, there's all kinds of things happening. And he killed the lion, killed the bear, killed Goliath. But there's a journey there of him fighting his battles where he wants to smash everybody and ask God to smash everybody. And why is my life so terrible? Why am I the one? Why, God, don't you have compassion for me? And so there's such a reality in the Psalms that when it comes to, when guys ask me, you know, what should I read? I'm like, read the Psalms, man. You're struggling. Read the Psalms. David struggled.
I agree.
And he won. God won through him.
That's so true.
And so church, man, we fallen human beings. We're all a mess. But for the grace of God.
Amen.
And when we go and set ourselves up above others, we're in trouble. And so I think we need to the church needs to set itself and say, we're a healing community.
That's right.
We're a healing community. People need to be restored. I'm restored from, maybe not from an addiction, but from all kinds of other things, because we all have sinned.
I want to come in here. I like what Abner said earlier on, and he said it took him to actually open the Bible. He had to have his own level of accountability. Let's talk about accountability, you know, to yourself and reconciling with yourself and God in the process.
Look, obviously, you know, when I got to rehab, the rehab that I went to, a friend of mine, Conrad, who's now a business partner, Conrad said to me, you know, I said to Conrad, God allowed me to go through. No. God didn't allow you to go through that. You have a will, and you chose to go through that. And God had to send a rescue plan to rescue you from the madness. So when I went to rehab, man, I was battered, beaten, and broken. My self-esteem had gone so low that it beggars description and staggered the imagination. But I'm glad that, you know, I remember I submitted myself to a church. And my leader, who is, you know, apostle, you know, I went to him on a Monday, you know, because I knew that he was in his office. A friend of mine took me there. I was thin. I took a love offering. You know, I asked him, I said, man, I'm on my way to try and recover my life. I'm praying to your God. Because I remember there was one time where I'd sit in my living room and I'd have crack cocaine on one side and cocaine on the other in the pipe, and I'd be kneeling because I was done with this life. But somehow I couldn't get up. It was like I was in a base, in a deep hole. And I remember I took my drugs to another province, dumped them, came back home with songs, singing, raising my hands. 2 o'clock in the morning, that addiction, that craving hit me. Called my dealers, couldn't find them. Got in my car, went back to the other province, driving 3 hours, 2.5 hours, looked for my drugs, and when I found them, I said, praise God, and I started to smoke. But what happened is that I took an offering to my apostle. I said, please pray for me, pray to your God to help me in my journey of recovery. And I started to take accountability, and I started to get in contact with my higher power. And my higher power was basically saying, Lord, as I am, just like Daniel said, as I am, I come to you. I come with no frills, and I like the fact that he said, you communicate with God. You don't, you know, and I'm a great communicator with my God. I said, Lord, you know, I messed up. I messed up. You can see me rough at the edges. I messed up again. But find it in your heart to forgive me. So I have a very strong foundation when it comes to my roots. My recovery is rooted in Scripture and in God. Without it, I'm nothing.
Well said, Abner. I want to bring you in on theme. We on this wave of recovery. And how have you maintained sobriety over the years?
Personal responsibility. You talk about accountability. Look, it's one thing. I lived in a treatment center and worked there for 5 years of my life. So I was in a safe environment as much as possible. Doesn't mean that the stresses of life didn't get to me. But I mean, I had a very strong support system in there. So a few months ago, I decided that, you know, I need to, no, actually, I'm saying I decided, God decided that it's time that I do something else, and I did not know what to do, and I couldn't imagine my life outside of the treatment center. And God made me move, and, you know, I upped and I left, and and this is where I started realizing, what I've been teaching other people and coaching other people about taking personal responsibility for your recovery. This is now, okay, now I need to start practicing that. Because nobody can do my recovery for me. I'm the only one that can do it.
That's right.
And also on a spiritual level as well. When you're in active addiction, basically what you are doing is you're busy committing spiritual suicide. So I'm still very much in the process of building that relationship with my higher power, and figuring out who I am in my faith. And but one thing that I can say for sure is, let's not let the stigma influence the way forward.
That's right.
Not against churches, not against treatment centers, and definitely not against addicts, because, addiction does not discriminate.
That's right.
It doesn't ask you what color you are, it doesn't ask you what religion you are, it doesn't ask you what sexual identity you have. When it comes for you, it comes for you. So we need to try and not break the stigma, because I think, as a community and in a recovery community, we are very far from breaking the stigma. But at least what we can start doing, and we are doing this right now, is starting to challenge that stigma. The stigma connected to addiction, the stigma connected to the treatment centers, which is crucial. And also the stigma connected to church and to religion. This is where we start. This is what we're doing. And it's like I had this bargaining with God this morning. Okay, you know what? I was telling Donnie earlier today, like, you know what? I don't want to do this thing, because you know what, I'm not a public speaker. It's in front of cameras. Don't have this, I don't have that. And a friend of mine reminded me about the story of Jonah, and how Jonah disobeyed God, and then he got swallowed by a fish. And you know what, I did not want to get swallowed by a fish, and I think I do not want to go sit there for 3 days in the dark. And I think, figuratively, I do not want to be swallowed by addiction again. I do not want to go back to that. I do not want to go back to spiritual suicide. I want to build this relationship with God. Acronym for God, GOD, Good Orderly Direction, which when you're in the depths of addiction, it's it's difficult to connect that word God with it's a gift of desperation. GOD.
Thank you for that. Dani, I'm coming back to you. She said a mouthful, and I want
For
to...
somebody who can't speak in
For somebody who's not a public speaker.
I don't want to do this.
Yeah, you have us fooled.
But what sort of... how can faith really assist in these setbacks, of recovery? How does faith steer you, towards this road of recovery?
I think Abner mentioned something in terms of him getting to the Bible and finding his own faith. I was thinking about it, and I think the important thing is to find your own faith, not to try and live off other people's faith.
That's right.
Because what sustains you is your own relationship with God, not someone else's relationship with God. And I think so many of our young people are growing up riding on the faith of their parents. And like, we're a Christian home, we do this church, but they hate church. And you can see that they don't have their own faith, because the moment they finish school and they go to university, they don't go to church. They don't go to a faith community of any sort, because they don't have their own faith. I want to encourage young people, get your own faith. Now, when you're young, find God. Pursue God. Pursue God now. Because you will have struggles, you will have difficulties. It's not like you're immune to difficulties because you serve Jesus. You will have challenges, and you're going to have to make some decisions. You might make the wrong decision. But in that space of maybe you end up going through recovery, maybe you have to go through something. But when you come out of that, you know you can connect with people and have your own faith that sustains you. that you know there's a God who loves you. You know there's a God who's for you. You kill the lies of God is angry with you, because that's the word. Our view of God our Father determines how we behave. If I think God's angry with me, I will behave like a child who thinks his father's angry. I try and avoid him. I don't talk to him. He's just going to hit me. But when we understand we have a God who loved us so much while we were sinners, when we were in a mess, when we couldn't care less about him, he made a way for us to have a relationship with him through Jesus. When I realized that, man, now I get it. God loves me. He's for me. He wants me to succeed. He wants me to overcome. So he's cheering me on, but I've got to make the decisions. Yes. Like you said, I've got to decide this. I've got to say yes. I've got to say no. And so and the tough thing is, even in terms of our spirituality and even our values, our values decide what stays and what goes. And so I've got to make some value decisions sometimes when it comes to friends, where I hang out, who I spend time with. And you might really like them,
Yes.
and you might have to say no more. Some of us might have to say no to our families who enable us in our journey and enable us to go back to where we were. And thinks it's a joke and thinks it's funny, and this is what we do. We drink, we do this, we watch that, we go shopping or gambling or whatever. But actually we've got to say no. We've got to find these values, and I believe we find them in faith. Because the Bible's values are not subjective, they're objective.
100%. I just want to challenge you.
So you must be careful. I start preaching. If you give me too much of a leash, then I go.
I want to challenge you as well, because you talk about God, the God of love, and he does love us, right?
Yeah.
But we also need to understand that he is a God of obedience.
Yes.
He is a God of obedience.
Yeah.
And if you don't, follow what he's intended for your life,
Yes.
there are repercussions for
Well, there are
that.
consequences to
There are
decisions,
consequences.
which are totally unrelated to God. You make decisions, things happen. You sow, you reap. It doesn't matter. That's the way the thing works. So the problem of it was God's fault, or how could God let me do this? Well, actually, you're not a robot. You chose.
You chose.
God's not controlling you. But yet God disciplines his children because he loves them. A good father disciplines his children, because otherwise you are setting them. You watch, I've seen parents who have not disciplined their children, and the children end up in rehab because there's no boundaries. Anything's okay, everything's okay.
Everything goes.
Just, if you want to try it, try it. Go for it. See what happens. Or they have a philosophy of, you've got to try everything. You just got to give it a go. Actually, no. There needs to be boundaries. And fathers and mothers. And that's the breakdown of society. You were talking about families in townships and all kinds of places. In poorer communities and rich communities, we have absent parents.
Yeah, true.
And a parent can be in a house and absent.
Sure.
And so there's, and the child might not get addicted to something when the child is a child. But that what was sown here reaps a harvest when they're 25, 30. Now suddenly there's a mess because of the boundaryless life that they lived over here. So God loves us, but and his love is unending. But his love doesn't turn a blind eye and just go, I love them, they must just do what they like. No, I love them despite what they do, but I want to direct them. I've given them my word. There's all kinds of things. Again, you're getting me preaching.
Yes.
I was at the university. I got invited. I was moved to tears. It's a group of young people who said, please come and share the word with us. So I arrived early and experienced their worship. I was literally moved to tears by the amount of faith, their prayerfulness, the atmosphere that was charged. I couldn't believe that these are young people at the university studying different fields, but unashamed about their faith and the God in whom they trust. And they just were pouring themselves out. I was just moved. And I said, if we've got young people like that, we've got a future in the country.
Beautifully said. You've just touched on the next question that I had. Success stories. We need to share these positive success stories. And I'm going to start with you on theme. What are some of the success stories that you have experienced at the Breakthrough Wellness Center?
Thank you, Tux. I haven't really been that long with Breakthrough, but success stories, definitely. I have seen God's hands move in ways unimaginable. People who walk in there, youngsters, the middle-aged, if I can call us that, the middle-aged. Of any age, any background, completely broken. I do not know where to go. I do not know where to start. Anonymity is very important, so I cannot be mentioning any names. But I had one specific gentleman come in, and till this day we still have a connection and we still communicate, And this guy also walked in there completely ashamed about his life and, disappointing the parents and the family and all of that. Because men sometimes feel ashamed to be opening up towards women about certain stuff, and I just said to him, you know what, I'm no better than you. Don't let the fact that I'm a woman intimidate you or make you feel ashamed. I'm no better than you. I'm an addict, and I've probably done worse than you have. And he opened up, and he spoke so freely about the stuff that he was ashamed about for so long. And I think that's where the magic lies. Once you break that, you make that breakthrough through the shame, and that's where the real recovery started. That's where the connection started. And once you get that connection, you start building on that. And that was a success story. And some people come in there for 21 days. Some people come in there for 3 months. Some people come in there for six months. There's people that's been in treatment for 2 years and it didn't work. But again, success stories. Here's a success story. Here's a success story.
There's a success story.
There's a success story.
The stories give hope. I think that's what's so important. These two, to me, I was thinking earlier, while we're sitting there, these guys are heroes.
Yeah.
Not because they're so great, but there's something that gives hope to others. And we think, Antine thinks, my story is so insignificant. It's significant.
It's impactful.
Write a book, do something, put the story out there. Somebody will be challenged, somebody will be changed. The Bible tells us we overcame by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. Amen. Tell your story.
Yeah.
Tell your story.
Tell your story. Speaking of which, I'm glad that you've touched on, sharing your own story. Abner.
Yes, sir.
You have written a book. You have written a book. And, just before we close off, can you just give us a quick snippet of what your book is about?
My book, I actually wrote two. I've got a workbook called Choose Life, which basically is an animated piece that we are curating for television. And it's basically, we want to create a noise around addiction, substance abuse, and all forms of addiction, and say, you gotta choose life. Behold, I've set before you
wonderful
doors. You can. So I put a book together called The Door, 309 pages, poured my heart in a book, and it's basically based on 7 doors. I've got the right door, the wrong door. I've got the door of hope and things like that. But it basically chronicles my journey with addiction. There's nothing, I leave nothing. Everything is in the book. So,
thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm sure that I'm definitely getting a copy. I don't know about others, but I'm definitely getting myself a copy. But before we close off, Danny, I'm coming back to you. What's your advice to a young person that is listening to you right now?
Choose the door of speaking to someone.
yes.
I think it's so important to speak to someone. It takes courage. Reach out to God, and sometimes you can't because you're like, I don't even know if God hears me. I don't know if God knows that I even exist. That's why I've got to reach out to someone, flesh and blood, and say, hey, I'm struggling. I've got a problem. And it takes huge courage. It takes huge courage. Find a church of people who will not judge you and speak. I think leaning on others is so crucial. We lean on Jesus ultimately, but we do that. Part of that is leaning on others to give us strength, to give us courage. And so I would say speak up. Families, speak up. There are places that can help your children, help yourself. Find these places. Speak up. Because if you keep quiet, it remains in darkness and you can't do anything about it. Because while it's in darkness, it's got power. It's got power. Darkness has power, but when you bring light, it exposes and brings freedom. And so I would tell guys, as I speak up, find someone. Reach out. Reach out.
Thank you so much, Danny. On theme?
Yes, Tux. Phew, okay, so I've got one thing to say to you youngsters out there. You are not alone, and thank you, Tux. I'm looking at the camera. You are not alone. Nobody, when you stand in faith, and nobody in this, I think the bishop said this, nobody and nothing can mess with your destiny. Do not be afraid. Step outside of those shadows. And it's very much time to face your giant. There are people like us here who are ready and able to do this journey with you. Do not give up. Do not give up.
Thank you so much. Abner, I know you have something special prepared for us, and I will allow you to close off with that something special. But I want to say goodbye to our amazing young people that are out there that have tuned in. Thank you so much for taking the time, for tuning in and really getting to understand the in-depth of what addiction is. I think the Archbishop has preached about this before, and he has said that whenever you have a choice to make, always choose God. So make sure that you always choose God, and remember that you're not alone. We are here. We're here to support you. We have our youth leaders. We have the broader leadership in the church as well. So make sure that you raise your hand, just as Dani has said, and make sure that you get your help. With that said, make sure that you remember that. Look around. God is still alive.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much. We just have an organization called Warriors in Recovery, and all those kids who are being labeled as Nyaupe boys, I've discovered a ministry in them, and we are mentoring them. We are taking them off the streets. You'll be surprised at the turnaround that they have. And every session that we have, at the end of the session, we read this poem, and that poem is a reminder of the depth from whence we come from. And it says, my name is cocaine, but you can add whatever drug that you have. It says, my name is cocaine, call me Coke for short. I entered this country without a passport. Ever since then, I made lots of scum rich. Some have been murdered and found in a ditch. I'm more valued than diamonds, more treasured than gold. Use me just one time and you too will be sold. I'll make a schoolboy forget his books. I'll make a beauty queen forget her looks. I'll take a renowned speaker and make him a bore. I'll take your mother and make her a whore. I'll make a preacher not want to preach. I'll take your rent money and you'll get evicted. I'll murder your baby so they'll be born addicted. I'll make you rob, steal, and kill. When you're under my power, you have no will. Remember, my friend, my name is Big C. If you try me one time, you may never be free. I've destroyed actors, politicians, and many a hero. I've decreased bank accounts from millions to zero. I make shooting and stabbing a common affair. Once I take charge, you won't have a prayer. Now that you know me, what will you do? You'll have to decide. It's all up to you. The day you agree to sit in my saddle, the decision is one that no one can straddle. Listen to me and listen to me well. When you ride with cocaine, when you ride with crack, with methamphetamine, with weed, you are headed for hell. But remember, God is on our side and we are always winners. We overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. Today, as young persons, under the leadership, the distinguished leadership of the Archbishop, we say to you, there is hope. Never give up. You are never alone. Talk to someone. Your life was meant to be more than what it is. You're destined for greatness, and God bless you.
Wonderful.
Amen.
With that said, that's the wrap for tonight. Thank you. Good evening.